Who's she? So cool. So queen.
It's Kristen. It's Kristen.
Yeah. It's Kristen.
Today's topic is one of great controversy and interest. We'll be talking about evolution. The history of evolution started with Charles Darwin. Human beings are involved in an intense struggle for existence. Darwin said that variation exists among individuals of a species. Lack of resources in a population would lead to competition between them. Such competition would lead to the death of individuals. Those with advantageous variations are more likely to survive and reproduce. An inherited variation that increases an organism's chance of survival in a particular environment is called an adaptation. Adaptations can spread throughout the entire species, causing evolution by natural selection. Natural selection can ultimately lead to the formation of a new species because of similarities in skeletal and muscular structure from a single ancestral species. I have invited special guests to help explain the science, language, and art behind evolution. Here to talk about the science behind evolution is Dr. Nathan Tai.
Woo! Yeah! Woo!
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for being here. So, what have your recent studies proven about evolution?
Well, let's first start with what evolution is. Evolution is any change across successive generations in the inherited characteristic and biological populations. Evolutionary processes give rise to diversity at every level of biological organization, including species, individual organisms, and molecules such as DNA and proteins. Life on Earth originated and then evolved from a universal common ancestor approximately 3.7 billion years ago. This ancestor went through repeated speciation and divergence of life, which led to adaptations to survive. This was caused by numerous factors, one being geographic isolation. The division of a population by a physical barrier, allowing each of the separated groups an independent evolutionary path.
So, are there any other types of evolution?
Yes, actually. Species may go into divergent evolution, the process by which an interbreeding population or species diverges into two or more descendant species, resulting in one similar or related species to become more and more dissimilar. They would adapt to survive. Those who were unable to adapt would die off, and those that did adapt would live on and create new offspring that had the necessary adaptation of their parents. This is an example of divergent evolution. As you can see, this was the original species of birds. Don't know its name, but they are now extinct. But then these are all these share the common ancestor of this species of birds. As you can see, they all have different beaks because they all needed to survive, and if they did not develop these different beaks and these different characteristics, they would have died off. However, those that adapted to their certain environment were able to live on and carry offsprings, and now you see that there are many different birds. Another type of evolution is convergent evolution, which is the evolution of species from different taxonomic groups toward a similar form, such as we have here in this picture. These are 4 different species, and they all live in similar environments, and therefore they develop similar characteristics in order to survive, even though they are different species. That is what convergent evolution is. These ideas all started with Charles Darwin, who was the first to formulate a scientific argument for the theory of evolution by means of natural selection. Back in the first picture, which was an example of natural selection as well, that was presented in Charles Darwin's literature, he talked of how the survival of the fittest is what caused different species.
Thank you for that great presentation.
No problem.
Let's give a hand for Dr. Nathan Tai.
Woo! Woo!
Woo! And now here to talk about evolution in literature is author of Evolution in You, Paloma Venegas. Woo! Thank you for having me. Thank you for joining us. So tell tell us about your new book.
Yes, my new book called Evolution in You is all about the controversy between evolution and creationism and how human population today is dealing with that. And in my book I explain how in school many children are learning about evolution, but many educators don't stop to think about how the conflict between creationism and evolution is affecting our kids today. And that's just a growing problem in the United States today because many families are affected by evolution teaching.
Okay. Have you done any other writing?
Yes, recently I've delved into some poetry all about evolution, and I'm planning to read an excerpt if you don't mind. Okay. When you were tadpole and I was a fish in the palazzo of time, and side by side on the ebbing tide we sprawled through the ooze and slime, or skittered with many a caudal flip through the depths of Cambrian fen. My heart was rife with the joy of life, for I loved you even then. Mindless we lived, and mindless we loved, and mindless at last we died. And deep in the rift of the Caradoc drift, we slumbered side by side. The world turned on in the laugh of time, the hot lands heaved amain, till we caught our breath from the womb of death, and crept into light again. We were amphibians, scaled and tailed, and drab as a dead man's hand. We cuddled at ease neath the dripping trees, or trailed through the mud and sand, croaking and blind with our tree-clawed feet, writing a language dumb, with never a spark in the empty dark to hint at a life to come.
So what inspired you to write such beautiful poetry?
Well, my poetry concerning evolution came all from Charles Darwin's excerpts, and I read his book entitled The Origin of Species, and there's one thing that really inspired me from him. As you may know, his ideas came from his first evolutionary trip to the Galapagos Islands, where he discovered that diversity of life arose from a common ancestor. So here's an excerpt from Charles Darwin's book, and this is really the main reason behind my writing. He says, "All that we can do is to keep steadily in mind that each organic being is striving to increase at a geometrical ratio, that each at some period of its life, during some season of year, during each generation or at intervals, has to struggle for life and to suffer great destruction. When we deflect on this struggle, we may console ourselves with the full belief that the war of nature is not incessant, that no fear is felt, that death is generally prompt, and that the vigorous, the healthy, and the happy survive and multiply." So basically this relates all back to human society and how, like the animals of the Galapagos Islands, we too go through natural selection to become happy individuals.
That was very interesting. Let's give a hand for Paloma Venegas. And here to talk about some of the art behind evolution is artist Tanya Steinberg. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So explain the art that you brought with you.
Okay, well the first piece of art we have is called The March of Progress, one of the most famous and recognizable scientific illustrations ever produced. It compresses 25 million years of evolution into 15 forebears marching from left to right. This image has been copied and modified countless times and is proven to be controversial, which I'll get to later. It was originally commissioned for the Time Life books for the Early Man volume, authored by F. Clark Howell, featuring the artist who actually drew this, Rudolf Salinger. And it's controversial because scientists have noted that it gives off the idea that human evolution is linear, which it's not. It's here in a sequential fashion, and it did not move along any kind of road toward any predetermined ideal, and they have faulted by misleading people and implying these things, but even with that, it's still regarded as famous and it has a lot of notoriety. The next one that I brought are Darwin's finches, his sketches of the finches, drawn by himself on his second voyage on the HMS Beagle in 1831 to 1836. And it's when he went to the Galapagos Islands, which he came to call the centers of creation. And birds, like the scientist, or doctor, Mr. Tai said earlier, just kind of, their different traits relate to their specified kind of, the things that they needed. They had specialized beaks for each one in different areas of the Galapagos Islands. And the last one I have is Michelangelo's The Creation of Adam from the Sistine Chapel, painted around 1511, one of the last frescoes that he drew in the chapel. And it's here because it comes from the biblical story from the book of Genesis, in which God here breathes life into Adam, the first man. And this is just an example of creationalism, which has been in constant battle with the theory of evolution for thousands of years, and still continues to be very controversial, most recently seen in the court case Scopes versus Tennessee, which people would sometimes call the monkey trial because of the argument of if Tennessee should teach evolution or creationalism in its classrooms.
All right, that was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We asked our audience before the show to answer this survey about what they thought about evolution.
57% said they were religious, 43% were not religious, 20% believe in creationism, 28% believe in evolution, 51% believe in both, 17% were influenced by their schools, 31% were influenced by their families, and 40% were influenced by school, family, and church.
And now here to perform, we have the Evolutionaries with their cover of The History of Everything from the TV show The Big Bang Theory.
Our whole universe was in a hot, dense state that nearly 14 billion years ago expansion started. Wait, the earth began to cool, the autotrophs began to drool, Neanderthals developed tools, we built a wall, we built the pyramids, math, science, history, unraveling the mysteries. It all started with the Big Bang. Since the dawn of man is really not that long, as every galaxy was forced in less than time it takes to sing this song. A fraction of a second and the elements were made. The bipeds stood up straight, the dinosaurs all met their fates. They tried to sleep but they were late and they all died.
They froze their asses off.
The oceans in Pangea see it wouldn't wanna be us, yet in motion by the same Big Bang. It all started with the Big Bang.
That was an A+ performance. Thanks for tuning in.
Woo!